Hey, everybody, welcome back to IDP Plus Trends. I am one of your co hosts, Johnny Freaking Fantasy. You can find me on Twitter at Johnny Freaking F1. As always, I'm joined by my co host, Steve from Average Joe's Fantasy Football. Make sure to follow him at Average AVG Joe's underscore FF. Steve, how you doing tonight, man?
I am great. It's been the weather's been crazy where I'm at. It's been going up and down. It's finally getting cool again. I don't know what's going on out there, but I'm enjoying myself. It's good. Spring's
Glad to
almost
hear
here.
that, brother. You ready to talk some deep stashes, some dynasty football tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. We're here to help people win. Like these are gonna be players you probably haven't heard of, or maybe you have and forgotten about that I think might help you out this upcoming season.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to it. Before we start, I just want to say idpguys.org, our website, who we're working for, is running a promo right now. You are eligible when you sign out, when you subscribe for a monthly subscription, use the promo code IDP guys, and you will get use the promo code mock draft, and you will get that first month for only $1. Once again, that's idpguys.org. Use the promo code mock draft, and you will get the first month of content for $1. This year in January, we already pumped out 100 plus articles and videos combined. We will continue that trend into February, into March, and all off season. Right now, it's an exciting time. We have a lot of dynasty startups starting right now. Today we're going to talk about deep stashes, deep picks for startups, players to buy low on. We are going to be talking all offense on this particular podcast, but we will have some defensive pickups too. Defensive pickups, buy lows, targets for startups. But right now we're going to bring you strictly offense, and we are going to move right into that list. Let's save the time here. Our criteria for this, we have three different categories. The first category that we'll talk about, and we do have multiple positions. So we're not just looking at one position. We're looking at offense, but quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. So we have guys on this list 17 guys, we have 36 total, 17 guys who we said are basically free to pick up right now. If you're
Pretty
in a
much.
dynasty league and you have somebody that ends up being hurt, somebody that you don't like where they're landing, somebody who's basically droppable, these guys right now are available and they have upside, for the future, for 2024. So other people are going to be, they might be relaxing right now. Other people are going to be doing this research soon. So make sure when you listen for our free to pick up section, that's what we're going to talk about first. We also
Yeah.
have guys who are probably owned, but they are considered buy lows from our, from our standard based on own percentage and probable value, going forward. Six of those guys. And then finally, 13 people who we consider 13 players are great targets for startups, either be late round picks, kind of stash plays. So we have a lot of content, a couple different angles coming at you tonight. Right now, we are going to start with those free guys. Like we said, right now, we'll talk roster percentage. The first guy we're going to talk about, we have two quarterbacks on this list. The first one is 23 years old. He has 2 years left on his contract. Tyson Bagent from the Chicago Bears. A lot of uncertainty right now with draft season. A lot of people thinking, is Justin Fields going to stay, go? To me, I'm not really worried about that. What my hunch is here for Tyson Bagent, I should say, is that he's probably looked good enough, and he's 23 years old right off the bat to come in and do well. I think he's earned himself a spot, whether it be if the Bears, with injury or on another team. Maybe not right now, maybe not in the offseason, but especially if a team comes up with a need. We've had a lot of quarterbacks who were injured this year. I think Tyson Bagent, he earned a spot elsewhere, if not with the Bears. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, he shows some value. And I think just like you mentioned, this past season was crazy when it came to quarterback injuries. I mean, there were a lot of championships playing with some quarterbacks like Joe Flacco that you never thought you would have, right? Like that's not something you thought you were going to be putting in your lineup. So I think this past season really shows, especially if you're in a super flex, you've got a pretty deep league, that these backup quarterbacks are more and more valuable than you ever thought. because of what just transpired. And who knows? I mean, you obviously never wish injury on anybody, but sometimes this is kind of a, hey, I've got a player, and we'll talk about one more after this, but these guys, some of them showed up really well, and that only helps them when a free agency opportunity opens up for them. And maybe they fall into another spot for a team that maybe their quarterback is a little more injury prone, or maybe they go in trying to fight for a spot, right? Because every team's always looking for that next star. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth stashing because of the fact that you never know what's going to happen, whether it is Fields or Caleb Williams. If Bagent could easily step in this offense.
Absolutely, man. And 23 years old, if you're in a dynasty startup, I mean, this guy's basically probably undrafted, in startups right now today. So definitely somebody, I have him stashed in a dynasty league on my sleeper app, just on the hunch that either, Justin Fields, it doesn't prove durable and he gets another shot there, or a team has a need where they go and hunt Bagent down. And I think he could be a good pickup. So, for NFL and your fantasy team. So that's definitely a good name to keep in mind. And our second guy at the quarterback position, who's basically free right now, unless somebody really has a hunch on, him going somewhere, and that's Jake Browning from Cincinnati. Jake Browning, he started, what is it? Was it 7 games? I think, he started 7 games. Man, he had 1,900 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, 7 picks. He had some really good games down the stretch for the Bengals, and they're probably not going to bring back this guy in any likelihood to start with Joe Burrow there. But Jake Browning, do you think we can see him in a different uniform and provide some value to another team?
It's possible. I will say this. I think Cincy brings him back because of one of two things. One, he knows this offense really well. Two, he showed value. And actually, really, if you wanted a third, I hate to say it, but Burrow's had some issues with some injuries, in his early career. He's still young, but you always want to have that insurance policy, right? Like sometimes it's worth having a little bit of a more expensive backup quarterback just because of, again, a situation that could happen. Browning was really impressive. He had top 10 QB performances 6 times last season. Like that. I mean, it wasn't like just an average backup. 6 times he was QB 10 or higher. Like that was amazing for him. And he just really gelled in this offense. So I think he does resign. I mean, it's smart. He definitely earned money. I can tell you that. I think he's going to definitely cost a lot more than he had anticipated. And yeah, there are probably some teams that might go after him. He is a little bit older. He's 27, but I think with his ability to, again, he knows this offense. I think he knows the personnel. He's a great backup at this point. There's no reason for Cincy to let him go.
Sure, man. And what a fruitful position he's in. I mean, Cincinnati there, they throw the ball, whether it's Burrow, whether it's Browning, looks like they can both get it done. So, good luck for Joe Burrow. Hopefully he makes that, 2 out of 4 seasons he hasn't played a full season. Hopefully he makes that 3 out of 5 next year that he has played a full season. But if not, Browning could be an option for your team. At 27 years old, a little bit older rookie. But these guys, when we talk about owned percentage, Tyson Bagent in sleeper app right now, he's only owned in 7% of leagues. Jake Browning in sleeper is owned in 30% of leagues. When we look at Yahoo, Browning, probably residual effect of him, being there for teams later in the year. Those teams that didn't make the playoffs probably didn't drop him. He's a little bit higher on Yahoo at 41%, ESPN 40%, NFL.com 30%. But again, Tyson Bagent, he's 1% from Yahoo to ESPN and then 0 in NFL.com. So both of these guys really low owned percentage right now. Good opportunity to pounce on them while their price tag is not high. They're basically free right now. So go if you need a quarterback, or if you're maybe sitting with a guy as your second quarterback, Sam Howell, someone like that who's not sure, Bryce Young, even in the future. These are smart pickups for you. Right now, we're going to move into additionally, we're going to move into the wide receiver position. We have 7 guys here. We have Terrace Marshall, Hunter Renfrow, A.T. Perry, Jalen Tolbert, Jujuan Jennings, Bo Melton, and Ronnie Bell. So we have a couple vets, a couple young guys, even some rookies on this list.
Yep.
Terrace Marshall, the first name that comes to mind. I've heard his name in a lot of potential trade talk, like, hey, this guy could be great if he goes to X, Y, or Z. I'm not, really too sure about that. He really hasn't shown much, but I guess that he's still young. He's 23 years old, still has 1 year left on his contract. But I guess as a prospect, this guy still fits the bill. He's still a sterling prospect and definitely has upside. Do you think Terrace Marshall, do you think he stays for this last year, or do you think he's even on the move before that?
I think he does stay, just because of the draft capital Carolina put in. They obviously want to go young. You got Marshall, you got Mingo. You still have Thielen there. I'm sure they're going to try to go after somebody, to add some value. Maybe they go after like a T. Higgins or a Mike Evans just to kind of add more value for Bryce Young in this offense. But I think Marshall definitely stays there. But he's got to show up. He's got to show up in OTAs. He's got to show up in the preseason. He's got to show why he should still be and why he was drafted where he was, to kind of help add some value to this team. He's got the talent. We'll just see if it really kind of plays off. Because one of the things I was looking at, like, Carolina struggled. The receivers struggled to get separation and getting open. Part of that's the scheme, so you can't blame it. So I do think this is going to be a big difference. And I think the Panthers do have a better offensive performance this season. So I think Marshall has an opportunity to really show up.
Absolutely. He still has that 1 year. It's not like there's, log jam in front of him. And keep in mind,
Yep.
I mean, they had Jonathan Mingo, a rookie this year. He didn't really do much either. So it's not like, somebody's there taking all the fruit and there's nothing left for anybody else. I mean, anyone can step up at any given time. If Marshall has that nice year next year, whether he gets a re-sign and his prospect goes up from that, or he goes to a different team, this is a player who's flying under the radar right now. Terrace Marshall basically free. He's owned in 25% of sleeper app, which is really down. That's usually where we see higher percentages. 0% Yahoo, ESPN, and NFL.com. So Terrace Marshall, maybe a name that you don't forget about. If you want to, you have room, pick him up. Another guy who we want to talk about is Hunter Renfrow, who I'd mentioned, 28 years old. I actually still have this guy sitting on a bench right now in the sleeper app on one of my dynasties. It's a deep league, so forgive me for that. But he still has 1 year technically on his contract. I'm hearing they're going to cut him most likely in Las Vegas. Now, a key note for Hunter Renfrow is that he is owed, I think, like 9 or 10 million this year, which is not deserved. So for Hunter Renfrow, you're probably not looking for a team to get traded. Trade for him. It's probably going to be a release and then sign from there. But at 37% on sleeper app, 1% Yahoo, 3.5% ESPN. He is a little bit older. You know what? I was thinking a team that has a lot of money right now could be like New England. I really wanted to see him go there when Bill Belichick was the coach. I don't think much will change from to Gerard Mayo. But Hunter Renfrow, do you think there are better days ahead for him, Steve?
He showed signs. I mean, he definitely. I mean, he was a good receiver for Las Vegas when let's call it when they were Oakland, right? He showed really good signs. Why he got the extension he did. The offense just kind of changed, and he was unable to adapt to it. His play style is not what this play style is for the Raiders. He's gotten high praise from competitors. The way he's able to move in and out of his routes, they're crisp. He's smart. Like, he knows how to get open. Obviously, like anything else with age, you start to lose some of that ability. You may not be as quick, but at 28, still somewhat young. But receivers, unless we're talking quarterbacks, receivers, again, 28, 29, 30, you start to see a little bit. Their prime starts to lower. I mean, they're right at that peak at 28, 29. Then you start to see some decline. I would love to see Renfrow in a position like Buffalo, right? Like, remember when they had they had Cole Beasley, right in that slot role. That's where Renfrow plays his best. Give him in the slot, have Kincaid. You've got, possibly Stephon Diggs, unless he gets cut or traded. And then obviously they go after maybe one other wide receiver, because I think Gabe Davis is gone after that. He's got some value there. Now, Buffalo does have a lot of cap issues. So again, they've got their own things to kind of deal with, but that's a great offense that I think he could perform and do really well. So he's definitely gonna be a cap casualty, right? He's definitely gonna be someone that's gonna be let go. He's definitely someone we're gonna have to keep an eye on, but he does have the ability to play. I like what he can do.
Right. So you're saying me as an owner, I'm stashing him, stashing. Right?
If you're in a deep league, unless you absolutely need the space because maybe you've got a lot of draft picks, there's no reason to let go of some of these players unless you're forced to, right? I mean, I get it. Like I have one league where I had to let go of some players I wasn't quite ready just because I had so many on IR and I had to make space for them, right? Like, you guys start thinking about those things. So unless you're having to, there's no reason to let go of Renfrow. And if you've got plenty of space, just pick him up. You never know. I mean, free agency is right around the corner. He may go to the right team, and you're like, man, I'm lucky I grabbed him.
And I really like that Bills fit for him, man. I think that would be a great landing spot if they can get him cheaper. Definitely. I mean, this is not a guy who's 31 years old. He could have a good, 2 or 3 years ahead of him at least.
Yeah, absolutely. He could sign a 1 year prove it deal, and then if he performs the way he possibly can, he's got another 2 to 3 years easily.
Absolutely. The next guy we're going to talk about is probably a little bit more owned, more of a household name when it comes to this year. Even though they were a rookie at 24 years old, still have 3 years left on that contract in New Orleans. Some hesitancy there based on, teammates, who's going to be there next year. A.T. Perry, another guy I'm stashing in my sleeper league already. 58% owned in sleeper, 1% in Yahoo, 0% ESPN or NFL.com leagues. A.T. Perry, I mean, we like this guy a lot. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on why we're saying to pick him up if you haven't already?
Yeah, so 58% is probably one of our highest owned when it comes to this, stashing, only because the fact that he was a rookie into this season, so he was drafted pretty highly. Coming into the season, there were some high expectations, but not sure how he was going to play and fit in this offense, especially when you had Michael Thomas, you've got Chris Olave, and then, I guess realistically, the thought process of what having Derek Carr was going to be, and that really kind of hasn't hand out quite yet. We'll see if this year 2 helps. But here's the thing with A.T. Perry. This Saints team is in cap hell, and they have got to figure it out. And I think with that said, a lot of veterans are going to lose their jobs, whether it be through trade or through cap cuts, because they've got to figure out how to move their money around, which gives a player like A.T. Perry an opportunity to shine and become a pretty valuable wide receiver 2 or 3 in this offense behind Chris Olave. That is why I think he has the value. I liked what he was brought into this season. Very talented receiver. I just think because of what's going on with their cap situation in New Orleans, they've got to make space. They've got to make room. He's not one of them, right? He's on a great rookie contract. You're not letting that go. Again, he's somebody who's worth stashing because he may end up having to be a starting receiver.
Absolutely, man. This guy, man, he's knocking on the door. I mean, they have Olave. Other than that, they have Shaheed, who's more of like a gadget player.
Showed up. Yeah. Shaheed's value is really in the return yards if you get points for that. So,
right. So A.T. Perry on the low there. Definitely a good stash if you have him already. If you're just a listener right now, you can't see. We noticed those Dallas Stars behind you, man. The next guy we're talking about, this is you. Jalen Tolbert, 24 years old. He got 2 years left on the contract. What do you know about Jalen Tolbert? You got that inside information.
So obviously I watched him since he came in as a rookie. Very disappointing rookie season. He did not adapt well coming from college to the NFL. And it showed up his rookie season. But man, did they absolutely love him his second year last year. Like Dak Prescott was talking highly of him. CeeDee Lamb was talking highly of him to the point where he showed some value. Again, he had to fight Gallup and Cooks for the roster, but realistically, Gallup's going to be gone. He's going to be traded away. His cap is too high. You're still going to have Brandon Cooks unless someone's going to offer a trade value. Cooks is going to be there. And you got CeeDee Lamb. Tolbert will be an amazing wide receiver 3 in this offense, and he's only getting better. He's one of the first receivers with Dak over the summer whenever they get together as a group. He was very talented coming out of college, but he just did not adapt well his rookie year at all. Not sure what it was, but this past year, watching him in OTAs and preseason and even some little bits here and there, he just showed promise. It's funny because I'll occasionally play some Madden every once in a while, and I actually put Jalen Tolbert as my slot receiver. And man, I could only see the potential of what he can do in this offense. He's way more explosive than Gallup is. He's able to, get open. That was the biggest struggle with Gallup. He had one of the worst separations from defensive backs. And a lot of it had to contribute to his injuries that he had. But I love Tolbert, and the fact that he's only 25%, it blows my mind that's how many people own him. Like, he is, even if he's not on my team at the moment, I'm putting him on taxi if I can, hold him a little bit longer, depending on how your taxi squad works. But he's definitely on my team for sure. I have him in majority of my leagues.
Absolutely. So good vote of confidence for Tolbert, probably going to be their number 3 receiver coming into next year. And hey,
Yep.
Brandon Cook's not getting any younger himself. What's he
Yeah.
have? Does he have 1 year after, 2024 will be his last year under contract there? Do you know
He's
that?
got 2 years. He had a 4-year contract coming in as a rookie. So he's got 2 years this year, next year. And he's got to shine. And if he does, I think he has strong value.
Absolutely. So Jalen Tolbert, definitely a name that, rubbed some people the wrong way, probably why he's down to 25%. Go pick him up. Next guy showed out at the Super Bowl, 25 years old, another free agent, Jujuan Jennings from San Francisco. We really saw him kind of flash late. He has been known to be a great blocker, maybe a better, to this point, a better real-life player than fantasy. Only 30% owned on Sleeper, 0% across the board, except for NFL.com. He has 1% owned there. But Jujuan Jennings, man, do you think that this last stretch run, I should say, in the Super Bowl, the way he threw a touchdown, made some nice plays, is he on the map for other teams, do you think? Or is this based on him re-signing with San Francisco as his best value?
Possibly. I will say his value will be with the 49ers. And I think his sleeper 30% rostered, a lot had to do with the fact that everyone picked him up after the Super Bowl. I guarantee you it was a lot lower before that. Because even I had a few leagues that people were picking him up just because of the way he performed. I think had they won the Super Bowl, Juwan should have been the MVP of that game. Like the way he played, he was phenomenal. So he has flashes. He's 25. He is a free agent. I think if 49ers want to keep, because 49ers got a lot to deal with. You've got to pay Brandon Ayuk. There's a rumor of that not happening. Like there's all, might as well keep somebody who can have some value. Again, we're talking deep stashes. We're not saying if you have one roster spot, like don't just hold them just to hold them. But if you've got a few roster spots you can possibly keep and afford, I would definitely grab him. And again, a lot of it I think is going to be based off of if he resigns with the 49ers. I think his value is a lot less if he goes somewhere else. I think someone's going to go after him because of his performance. Everyone does it, right? Everyone always signs someone who has 1 or 2 good games in the playoffs, thinking that's going to change their outcome. Because I don't think he'll ever be a starting wide receiver. He's not going to be a 1 or 2. He's definitely going to be that 3rd or 4th guy who's going to have some value here or there. And again, he could do those trick plays and stuff like that. So I think his value is more in the 49ers offense than anything else for sure.
And there's another guy too. I'm gonna jump to him. He's on this list. Ronnie Bell. I'm stashing him right now in my sleeper dynasty league. Ronnie Bell, rookie this year, was a good prospect. He had a couple flashes in the pan early on. There were some injuries there that helped him, make some fantasy relevance. I actually picked him up when that happened. I thought I was ahead of the game. But then it seemed like they didn't use him the rest of the season. If it's not Jennings, if he doesn't resign, do you think that Ronnie Bell, I should continue to stash him? I feel like, man, he has a high potential there. They don't seem to have a lot of turnovers. They're wide receivers, right?
He's under contract, so it's not like they have a reason to keep Juwan if they feel they see something in Bell. So he can, try to fill in some of that role that Juwan's going to leave behind. But I don't know. I mean, he's definitely, again, you're talking deep leagues. Yeah, he can definitely be worth somebody, putting him on your roster, see what's going to happen. We're obviously going to see a lot of changes in the next, few weeks with free agency. It's going to help you kind of really tailor your roster properly. But this is a good opportunity to grab some of these players before free agency starts, because once that happens, that's when people start going crazy in Dynasty. That's where you start seeing a lot of more waiver activity, a lot more trade activity happening. Like this is that lull right before, because everyone's kind of unsure what to do. They're not sure if they want to trade or pick up. These are some great players. You don't, hey, if you got a few spots, grab it, put them on there. Obviously, we got a decent amount of list on here. So these are going to be some players you got to think about what position is important to you, because their wide receiver position is probably one of the more important roles, especially in full PPR. So, yeah, he's definitely worth a grab.
Absolutely. And see how it shakes out there in San Francisco. If Jujuan Jennings gets resigned, boom, there's your pickup right there. No need for Ronnie Bell.
Yep.
If Jennings goes elsewhere, boom, Ronnie Bell. Straight to the team, right? The last wide receiver we have on our free to pick up right now really showed out the last couple games of the regular season. Second year wide receiver. He's a restricted free agent this year from Green Bay, and that's Bo Melton. I know they have a lot of receivers there, and he's already owned in 27% of sleeper app. So that does show the vote of confidence people have in the young rookie, even though he's in a flooded, log jam. Talk about a log jam there in Green Bay with those wide receivers. Do you think that Bo Melton can separate himself from the pack, or do you think that he's going to go back to the bench, or possibly land another deal elsewhere?
I think he goes elsewhere. I think they really love this core that they have in Reed and Wicks and Watson. Obviously, Watson's got the injury concern that you got to deal with. It's several years that he's got to figure out how to stay healthy. But I think they love this core. I think Melton. It's hard for him to get in there. He was picked up for sure due to injuries, but I think he goes elsewhere for sure.
And do you think he can have value elsewhere? He can be a number 3, number 2, or he's not going to get that look.
I don't know if he'll get number 2. I think he could possibly number 3. There are several teams that have wide receiver issues, right? You think about the Titans. They don't have great receivers behind Drake London and Atlanta. Okay, right? Like there are several teams that don't have amazing 2s or 3s behind their star or superstar. Not everybody has the luxury of having 2 or 3 solid players at the wide receiver position. Not everybody's the Cincinnati Bengals. Heck, you could put Bo Melton on the Kansas City Chiefs and he could almost be a wide receiver 1. Obviously, Rice is there, but like that's kind of the rosters that are out there. So, yeah, if he's put in the right position, he definitely can have some more value.
Absolutely, man. I like Bo Melton myself a lot too. I think that if he gets another shot elsewhere, he can make good on that easy. We're going to move into our running backs that are free for pickup right now. First one I want to talk about, a little high on own percentage. He was a big touted prospect last year, probably mostly due to his play role as a passing back. He did well at Oklahoma. And then we saw him get drafted to the Giants behind Saquon Barkley, and that's Eric Gray. I feel like this is a guy who was really picked early last year in rookie drafts, but the Sterling kind of rusted a little bit, right? He didn't really get a shot. He was injured. Saquon right now, his status is up in the air. He could go somewhere else, which would make Eric Gray an immediate pickup. Steve, what do you think about Eric Gray?
Yeah, so of the running backs we're going to talk about, Eric Gray is the only one that I have any really vote of confidence in because of the fact that Saquon is most likely gone. They're going to probably tag him again. And we saw how that kind of went this past off season. But Eric Gray, I think, can beat out Breda, who's the backup running back technically to Saquon. And he could potentially be, a nice little RB1A or 1B, 1B, depending if they go after another veteran or something like that. Because realistically, this rookie class is nothing to be really like super excited about. So what the teams have roster wise are probably going to be the guys the next one up, right? Like if Barkley leaves, Eric Gray becomes a really highly go after type of running back. The fact that he's available still in 48% of leagues in sleeper, it's kind of shocking, especially when you can put him on taxi right now. Like there's no reason to not have him on your roster. Even if you put him on your taxi squad, let him sit for another year or so if that's what it takes. So yeah, kind of shocked by that.
Absolutely, man. Me too. Eric Gray. I mean, I was sending trades out for him this year, and probably until the end of the year, nobody was willing to give him up. And here we are at the end of the season, going into next year, and boom, right around 50%. So Eric Gray, definitely a guy right now, probably out there. Go pick him up. The next two guys, 25-year-olds. The first one's a restricted free agent, and the second one, played his first year. He's a little bit older for a rookie, and that's Ronnie Rivers and Emari Demercado. You said you weren't high on them. Maybe for Ronnie Rivers, it's all it takes is one injury to Kendre Williams. That's if he's brought back, right? So if he had 3 years on his contract, you might feel a little bit better about it. He's going to have to get back there in LA himself. Ronnie Rivers or Emari Demercado, which one would you prefer right now to stash?
Just based off of the contract situation, you got to go with Emari, which is why his percentage is a little bit higher. He's 31% owned compared to Rivers at 10% owned. But Emari did actually have opportunities this past season where he, came in. He had a few good games, right? Filling in for James Conner. And James Conner is obviously the starting back, and he's a good back, but he has had some health concerns. He's a little bit older, and they're going to probably, to stretch out his season, they're going to have to use Emari probably more often than not, where Ronnie is going to be fighting for a roster spot, right? Like LA absolutely loved Kendre Williams, and they're obviously clearly showing they're going to use and abuse him until he's done, because he's on that, young contract. So it depends on Rivers and where he lands. There's not a lot of team openings that I could think of that he might have some value. It just depends on where vets might get moved around. Like if Derrick Henry leaves Tennessee, then you've got Tyjae Spears, and that's really it, right? Like they don't have anybody truly back there, so maybe a spot he lands there. But I think Emari absolutely is the better value for sure.
Absolutely right. So just wait, see what happens to Ronnie Rivers. You're basically hunching that he's going to get re-signed and he's the number 2 back. Draft day might throw a wrench in that plan, but right now, Demercado, yeah, I mean he this year when given a chance, he had 3 games with 50 or more rushing yards and a 4th game with 45 rushing yards. And I want to say just about the premise there, what's going on with Arizona, man. James Conner, kind of had a year that nobody wanted to touch him. Really made people look bad on that, but he's really, if James Conner gets hurt, boom, he's the number 2. Demercado's there and he's starting, right? But at the same time, they had Keontae Ingram there, the 2nd string back this year. A lot of people liked him. If James Conner got hurt, he really didn't get any touches. So as great as a spot it is for Demercado, it's probably going to take an injury, right, for him to step up.
For sure.
And then finally, we have some tight ends here who are free right now, more or less. The only guy who's owned in 50% or more sleeper is the first guy we're going to say, and that's Noah Fant. Noah Fant, man, he's only 26. He's a free agent. He could land a nice deal somewhere. There's teams out there that need a tight end. A lot of people probably rubbed the wrong way of how he was used, whether it be in Denver or Seattle. They had a lot of tight ends there. They really threw to fluidly to many of them, not just one. Noah Fant, do you think where he signs, he'll have better days ahead?
Absolutely. I think if Noah Fant, I actually wrote an article for IDP about Noah Fant, where he could possibly go. I think either Cincinnati or Washington, and he'd instantly have value. Instantly, he's a good tight end. He's a very talented tight end. He's very athletic. He just was not used at all. Like he showed flashes before, but he just was not utilized at all. And a lot of it, I don't think it had anything to do with him. It had to do with the scheme and the way the offense was maneuvered around and the focus. Like especially you think about Seattle, right? Going from possibly the 3rd or 4th option to like maybe the 5th. I mean, you get Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. You got Metcalf. You got Lockett. Like you had Charbonnet, who they added. You got Kenneth Watt. Fant was essentially just kind of thrown out there just to kind of help block, and that was about it. Because when he did catch the ball, he was very effective down the field. They just didn't use him at all. So Fant is definitely someone 54%. Man, I wish I had some leagues that still had him available in the waivers. I would have grabbed him in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. Only 26 years old. Noah Fant, 54% of owned in sleeper. If he's available in your league, go get him. He's our number 1 guy here at the tight end. Some other guys who could spring into value based on the guy ahead of them, what happens there. In Houston, both of these guys are 23 years old. In Houston, the first guy is Brevin Jordan. We saw him have flashes, even back to his rookie year there in Houston. Really fluid position there at the tight end. We saw Schultz have a really nice year. We're happy about CJ Stroud, him making another step forward there with his 2nd year. Brevin Jordan is another guy who, is basically free right now, 44% owned on Sleeper, 10% Yahoo, 4% ESPN. And also another 23-year-old Daniel Bellinger from New York. Darren Waller's only getting older. When Waller was hurt, even before Waller was on the team, we saw Bellinger do some good things there. Both of these guys are young. There may be a injury or a re-signing, a teammate re-signing to have significant value. Brevin Jordan and Bellinger, I'm going to say don't sleep on them. At least have an eye on them. If you need tight end help, they're probably a good, low, cheap option. Steve, what do you think about them?
Bellinger, obviously it was unfortunate when Waller came in, but again, injury is definitely going to help add value for Bellinger. Quarterback play was not helpful, so we'll see how that goes for the Giants. Brevin Jordan I like because right now technically Schultz is a free agent. So right now the only Brevin's under contract. He's still got a year. So the fact is if Texans don't bring back Schultz, which I don't see why they wouldn't, but in case they don't, I could see where Brevin Jordan comes in and now he's got strong value in that passing offense. Because then you get a healthy Tank Dell. You've got obviously Nico, right? And then you've still got some pretty good running backs behind you. And then now Brevin Jordan, like who you're going to focus defensively. You've got to pick and choose your weapons. And Brevin Jordan could be somebody who shines really well. So I like him a little bit more than Bellinger, just because I think he could potentially be the starting tight end if Schultz does not resign.
Absolutely, man. And two other guys we have on this list we want to say. It was a rookie this year, the first one. We saw him when Higbee went down. Davis Allen had a couple nice plays. He even scored a touchdown late in the season for the Rams. 23 years old. He got 3 years left on his contract. You're probably hoping that this guy's the tight end number one. They don't really sign anybody. They don't bring in any help from the draft. If that's the case, Davis Allen may be in a spot to find fantasy production. And also a free agent, 29-year-old Pharoah Brown. He's only owned in 2% of sleeper leagues. Davis Allen a little bit higher, 35%, but Pharoah Brown only 2%. Steve, what do you think about these two?
So Davis Allen obviously still in a contract. Obviously Higbee going down late in the season gives Davis Allen an opportunity. But like anything else, understand when you pick up with these players, have the depth, grab them, and don't be afraid if it doesn't pan out because of free agency or rookie. Like for example, Brock Bowers has been possibly tied to the Rams. Like it's okay, you can drop them again. It doesn't hurt to pick up these players and just hold on and see what happens. Because if the Rams don't go after a tight end, Davis Allen becomes the tight end one until a healthy Higbee comes in, right? Now Pharoah Brown, obviously 29, he's one of our oldest players that we're going to talk about in this whole thing. He's shown signs, but there's a lot of issues with the Patriots. Do they resign him? Possibly, because obviously they've got issues with Hunter Henry now being a free agent. Gesicki did not perform well at all. They need to add somebody. Pharoah might actually be a cheap option for them to resign and then have some value because they don't have a lot of weapons for whatever their quarterback position. Who knows who it's going to be. So yeah, he might have some value if he does resign. He is definitely a little bit harder to understand and maintain on your rosters because, man, you don't know what's going to happen. He's 29. I get it. But tight end is a little bit hard. There's a couple of them coming into this rookie draft, unlike last season where there were a lot of good rookies that came into the draft. Tight end position is still hard to really kind of judge. And, there's probably 5, now more, really elite tight ends, where before it was what, 1 or 2, right?
Right.
It was it's crazy how this last year's rookie class just changed the tight end spectrum. Because before it was really hard, but now you got some really good tight ends that are really young and talented. I still think Pharoah Brown's got some ability that if he's in the right position, I like him in New England just for a safety valve, give that young quarterback and someone big to throw to,
Right. Especially in New England there. They really don't have much else right now.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to move into our buy lows. So these guys, we're going to mention these 7 players, most likely they're owned. The lowest percentage owned for Sleeper app is 63%. So these guys probably are household names, are already on teams, but you could probably make a case at least for buying them on the low. The first guy we're going to mention, we only have 1 running back on this list. He is a young guy, 23 years old with 3 years left on his contract. 87% owned Sleeper app. Outside of that, he's 25 on Yahoo and less than that on ESPN and NFL.com. Roschon Johnson, I have him in my Sleeper app. I really like him a lot. I'm preaching patience with him. I think that next year, he really didn't get a fair shake this year. Next year, I'm kind of throwing out this year and looking forward to next year. I think that 3 years left on the contract. He's definitely going to be there. They really don't have much else. Lost Tariq Cohen even. Roschon Johnson, I think, is a guy who can make that leap. You should go make a trade for. Steve, do you agree?
Yeah. So he's still the RB2 behind Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert disappointed and then showed up. It was weird how his season was. Like he didn't start off strong. Obviously was injured. And then he showed up really strong towards the end. Roschon was pretty consistent. Wasn't great, but he was consistent. He's got flashes. He was great at Texas. He was behind Bijan Robinson, so he never got the sun or light shining on him during his career, unfortunately. But if you watched any of his film, he was a great running back out of college. I think he was a better pass catcher than Bijan, and Bijan made some crazy plays this past season in the passing game. So he's got that value there. Obviously, quarterback's going to play a factor. Is it Fields? Is it Caleb? How's that going to go? But I think Roschon ends up moving up in the depth chart and could possibly replace Khalil Herbert. I'm really high on him. I went after him in a lot of my rookie drafts. I tried to at least. He is going to be a little bit of a tougher buy low. If you can get someone to really look at the fact that Khalil Herbert showed up, he's had some value. Maybe you got somebody who's like, man, do I really want to hold on to him? You have to look at where they drafted Roschon. If someone drafted Roschon early second round, right, he's going to be a little tougher to get. But if someone drafted him in the third or fourth round of their rookie draft, yeah, you might be able to throw a third, maybe even a second, get him a little bit to entice, right? Because running backs, again, this rookie class is amazing. And if you need a young running back, I would rather spend a mid to late second on a Roschon Johnson than probably go draft one. So I like him a lot for sure.
Yeah, Roschon, man. Hopefully Khalil Herbert, he steps on up above him. I don't really like Herbert that much. I don't really know too many people that are very high on him. So Roschon Johnson, very, very close to being a fantasy superstar here. At least has the potential to have the platform, the opportunity. Yeah. So that's our running back to go buy low right now while the getting's good. We're going to move into some we have 4 wide receivers. The first one being, these guys are all young. Jalin Hyatt, 3 years left on his contract. He's 22. We saw some flashes in the pan. He's owned 78% of sleeper apps. Probably most people are going to have the same thought as us. Just really was down year for everybody in New York. Their quarterback wasn't there. A lot of guys with the similar traits there in New York. Jalin Hyatt, do you think that there's a team out there that, might be down on him to say, I don't know if he's ever going to step up? We're only a year in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, Hyatt just drafted, right? Young, definitely a very talented receiver, one of the better route runners for sure, has a lot of potential. He's a very similar play style, though, of a lot of the other receivers on this roster, but I think he's the one that really kind of stands out. As far as buying low, again, look at where he was drafted in the rookie draft, possibly go, second round if someone's looking to kind of fill. This is a deep wide receiver class coming into this one, so don't get too crazy with your trades. I would rather trade a veteran wide receiver that's got a little bit more name established. And if you can afford that, like letting go of a vet to get like a Jalin Hyatt, like again, it depends. Like like at the top of my head, I'm thinking, okay, if I've got a Mike Williams, for example, household name, definitely performed well in fantasy when he's been healthy. Add maybe him into the mix, like, hey, I'll give you Mike Williams for Jalin Hyatt. Sure. I think about things like that. Like I'd rather take a little bit of a possible risk on a young player like Hyatt with the fact that, even if it's Daniel Jones, I still have some hope if it's Daniel Jones, at least fantasy wise, that, it brings him some value. And I'd rather get rid of an aging vet or someone who I don't need to keep just to get somebody like that.
Yeah, man. Jalin Hyatt, probably better days ahead. He's, maybe rubbed his owners in the wrong way in the mouth. So definitely a guy that you can make a case to buy low right now. Another young guy, 2 years left on his contract, a year older, 23, Treylon Burks from Tennessee. Yeah. Maybe he's owned highly right now, 82% of sleeper apps, but maybe that's because they have their quarterback for the future there. They don't have Tannehill. They're not rolling out him anymore. They have Levis. Treylon Burks was a guy who we weren't far off of talking him in a first rounder in rookie drafts years ago. Still only 23 years old, shown flashes in the pan. Man, probably his owners are just so upset about him not being able to stay on the field. I think that's his caveat. But Treylon Burks, man, I mean, and not even banking him on the Titans. He could show out for the Titans and go somewhere else. But to me, at 23 years old, that's okay. He's probably going to be, if you have him the next 7 or 8 years, he's probably going to be on a different team at some point. I don't think that's such a bad thing. Treylon Burks, do you see any hope there? Do things get better? He can stay on the field?
So I am not completely sold on Treylon Burks, but if you can get him at a cheap price, then do it. I never was super high on him when he came into the league. I had higher hopes on other players. I comped Treylon Burks a little bit lower, even though he was highly drafted, probably mid first rounds in most rookie drafts. He's got draft capital from the Tennessee Titans. Everyone thought he was going to be the replacement of AJ Brown when they traded him away. There are a lot of things going against him, which, again, like you mentioned, if you're an owner who drafted him in the first round, you're like, wow, this has not panned out well. You might get him at a pretty cheap price, right? You might get him for a late second, early third round if you're just willing to take the risk and put Burks on your team and see what happens in this year. So yeah, it's definitely worth grabbing. I'm not super crazy about him personally. Like if I can get him for a third round, sure, that's worth it to me. That I don't mind giving up a third round pick. I'm not going low twos. I'm definitely not giving up a first. Maybe a really aging, if I'm not in a win now mode, maybe like a Tyler Lockett or somebody for Treylon just to get somebody younger. Something like that makes total sense to me. But he is a highly owned. A lot of people spend some draft capital on him. So he's gonna be you might, depending on how your league mates are, it might be a little bit challenging. He's still got another year with Hopkins. I think Hopkins has one more year in the contract. Obviously, got Will Levis another year behind him. Obviously playing half the season essentially. So we'll see how that looks. New head coach, new regime. So maybe this is a good thing for Treylon. So, but you guys spin it right, and I think you get him at a good price, and he might finally show up and do really well for you.
Absolutely, man. Treylon Burks, hot, cold, everything in between. If you can get him for the low price tag, send it. Yeah, next guy we're going to talk about, 22 years old, still has 3 years left on the contract. We had mentioned him before as a rookie who did not step up. We were waiting for it. I thought maybe after the bye week we were going to see some things go right for Jonathan Mingo. 80% owned. This guy's still up there. He's high rostered, but do you think this is a guy who you can easily pry? Would you even want to pry him away from another team? Are you high on him? Is there still greener days ahead?
There's a lot of uncertainty, obviously, with the coaching changes. But realistically, he is there. I guess you would say wide receiver too, because you still got DJ Chark, you still got Thielen, like you still got some of the vets in the way. But again, DJ Chark didn't perform well. The only concern I have with Mingo, and I do like him, is the fact that he was one of the worst wide receivers to create separation, like to get open. Like he struggled in this, and I think that's going to change. I think new offensive scheme and things like that will help. So keep that in mind. But being that he was just a rookie, this past season, he was just recently drafted. He's still a name that people are trying to hold on to, kind of like, we mentioned, talk about Jalin Hyatt, like might be a little bit tougher, but you might get somebody who wasted a second round pick on him and say, man, what was I doing? Like, because a lot of people are afraid. I mean, we're not going to talk about him here, but like Bryce Young, man, did everyone just jump ship after this season? Like you see a Stroud who played amazing, then you see Bryce Young played the complete opposite. So many people are jumping ship. I got Bryce Young super cheap in a dynasty because somebody felt so burnt by him. Yeah. So you might have a league mate, same thing with Mingo, right? Who just like, man, I put a little bit of draft capital behind this guy and I just didn't see it, right? Or they don't believe in this Carolina offense. So he can definitely be somebody you can grab for sure.
Right. Things to work on. He's got to get separation. They got to protect Bryce Young, get some other talent there in Carolina. Hey, if that happens, he's not too far off from having fantasy significance, right? So Jonathan Mingo, maybe someone you send a last round pick, fourth round pick, something like that. Someone might bite. They might be excited about the draft this year. Yeah. But definitely a name to keep in mind. Send an offer out. And one more wide receiver while we're on the buy lows is John Metchie. And maybe because not necessarily, he's been on the field and killed it, but he's still 23 years old. He did have health concerns. He came off, I think it was it lymphoma or I think it was lymphoma. He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We saw what it did to James Conner. It took him a year or so to get right. John Metchie, I mean, he's just in a good landing spot here in Houston.
Yep.
They have Collins, they have Tank Dell. Outside of that, though, I mean, if one of those guys gets hurt, we've seen John Metchie be called upon, and they do have Noah Brown, some other guys there, but Noah Brown's older himself. I don't see him, besides maybe another year or two having fantasy relevance. But John Metchie, any given time, if he's in that top one or two, probably number two at best, role, I think we can see some fantasy significance from him. Is he still a player you think, or you can, get low for the low?
Yeah. Oh, I for sure. I have him in a few of my leagues. I drafted him in a few of my leagues. Very talented kid coming out of Alabama. The health concern his rookie year definitely threw a wrench in his career so far, which has put him behind. Then you got obviously some really good young talent in like Tank Dell. Obviously Nico finally showed up, and that might be kind of the same thing. And maybe John Metchie finally shows up. Like everyone, I loved Nico Collins, but didn't really show up. And then this past season, Nico played the way Nico should have played all his career so far. So Metchie has that ability. He's obviously 2 years still left in the contract. As long as the Texans don't draft a wide receiver, I think Metchie's value is still there. I know they got Robert Woods, that the vet that obviously I think he's probably going to be a cap casualty, but I'm still holding on to him. You can get him probably fairly cheap. As you can see, though, people are still holding on 63%. So people do believe him because he was a highly drafted pick in fantasy for some, and then obviously into the real life. So yeah, but I like him, man. I hope I'm really hoping he has a really solid career.
Yeah, I think so too. 23 years old, still a lot of time to turn it around.
Yeah.
This is really his first kind of year putting it together. So it's kind of a rookie year. I mean, we've seen a lot of players make the sophomore jump, so maybe he can be one of them. And finally, I mean, we're talking about young guys here. We got another one at the tight end position, 24 years old, man. I didn't realize this guy was that young. Mm-hmm. 2 years left on the contract. Cade Otton, probably owned. He's owned 75% of Sleeper app. 30% Yahoo, 8% ESPN, and 19% NFL.com. Cade Otton from Tampa Bay, man. I mean, he's going to be back next year. We know that. He's got 2 years left. Didn't do bad this year, 24 years old, right? So do you think another year in that system, another year with Baker Mayfield, hopefully, that things can get better from here for Cade Otton as well?
Yes. I like Cade Otton. He's a good tight end. I think he fits this offense really well. I wish they would utilize him a little bit more, but I do like him. I'm obviously a lot's going to be held on the fact that they're going to re-sign Baker. That's a big piece. Like if you got to get Baker back into that Tampa uniform, if they go somebody else, say Baker goes somewhere else because they really put some money behind it, and Tampa gets Ryan Tannehill, I might be a little bit more concerned for Cade Otton at that point. But yeah. I don't think Tampa's going to be stupid and let Baker go. So getting Baker back is going to be a key thing. So you got to keep an eye on how this free agency comes about. But I like Cade Otton, 75% owned. So you have a few people out there, you might get lucky picking him up, but he's definitely going to be a cheaper buy. And it's somebody worth buying, especially if you need a tight end position. Don't give up a super large amount. Maybe you have a bunch of receivers and a team needs a receiver. Maybe get a little vet in there and throw him in. So, but I'm not saying Cade Otton's going to be a top 10 tight end. I think he can stretch into that top 15 mark if he performs the way he's capable of.
Definitely right now, especially if you're doing a startup, probably low price tag, right? With all these rookies coming into the league, he's probably a guy who last round picks, slim pickings. So Cade Otton, man, at 24 years old, definitely could have some nice years ahead. Yep. We're going to move in right now to our final segment, our final grouping of players. And that is right now, if you are starting up a dynasty league, these are players to target later in your draft. Also, if they are available, go ahead and pick them up. I doubt they are. They're pretty high owned, and it looks like 65% owned or higher. So probably you're looking at these guys for a startup, probably not spending a heavy price tag on them. But when we talk about stashes in a startup, these guys fit the bill. Yep. The running back position, we have Keaton Mitchell, 22 years old, 2 years left on his contract. Kendre Miller from the Saints, 21-year-old, 3 years on the contract. Israel Abinakanda from the Jets, 21 years old, 3 years left on the contract, and Tank Bigsby, 22 years old, 3 years left on the contract. These guys all have at least 2 years left. Keaton Mitchell, Miller, Israel Abinakanda, and Tank Bigsby. Steve, if you had to pick one or two guys out of this tier to improve on their fantasy stock, who would it be?
So I think people's obvious would have been Keaton Mitchell because of what he was able to do for the Ravens before his injury. I'm going Kendre Miller. I love what this kid was able to do coming from TCU. And he wasn't drafted in the perfect scenario, right? I think they drafted him because of the whole, Kamara, Alvin Kamara situation. They weren't sure what was going to happen. Obviously the suspension, blah, 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 right? And, of course, New Orleans decided to throw a wrench in and go after Jamal Williams. But Kendre Miller, I think, has the ability to become easily the running back too. And, of course, who knows what's going to happen with Kamara? Again, this Saints team has got to figure out their salary cap. Do they trade Kamara? Do they keep him? Do they restructure his contract? Like, what do they do with him, right? Alvin Kamara has never been 1,000-yard back. Kendre Miller can be 1,000-yard back. Like, that's the type of ability he has. So when you're talking startup draft, Kendre Miller you can get in a late round because you don't have to use a lot of your draft capital to grab him. But to understand he is going to be somebody who's going to be a future potential starter in a year or two. Like that's kind of the expectation for him. The other is Tank Bigsby. I like Bigsby a lot. I hyped him up a little bit too much. I will admit. Not that I don't believe in ETN. I just don't believe in that offensive scheme. I always felt like Doug Peterson was going to use a 2-back system, and they drafted Bigsby kind of high because I was kind of surprised by that. He was used, don't get me wrong. Definitely has to adjust. Running back is a little bit of a weird position when it's transitioning from the NFL, unless you're just generationally talented. But Bigsby definitely has the red zone ability. All it takes is, ETN to get hurt. Bigsby's now the guy. So again, he's a solid RB2 at this moment behind him, and he's definitely worth somebody you can definitely draft later on for sure.
Absolutely, man. I like that point to say about Kendre Miller. He's not far off, from a big year. And I mean, looking back at the history of the Saints, they really retain similar running backs year after year. They're really not leapfrogging it too much. So, Kamara, his status is, ultimate here. But at the same time, Kendre Miller, 21 years old, and especially if you're in a Dynasty in Yahoo, right? I said these guys are 65% or more in sleeper, so they're probably not available there. But there are people, Steve, I think you're one of them, right? You played Dynasty for Yahoo.
I have one league in Yahoo, a majority obviously in sleeper, but I have one league in Yahoo, and it is a little different. It's different. There's a lot more people who use Yahoo as a redraft league platform. So yeah, the fact that anybody who is doing Dynasty in the Yahoo platform, that's a low percentage of 4%. So that's crazy to me. Like to see that some of these guys are here. So I think some of it is, again, majority of people will move into sleeper, but if Kendre Miller's there, why are you? I mean, even there's 14% of people still in sleeper who are not rostering Kendre. Like, get him, put him on your taxi at this point, even if you sit on him for a year or two.
Absolutely, man. I think even before that, maybe this year we'll see that spike, so jump on it before it's too crazy. And maybe a trade low. Someone thinks, I drafted him high, but didn't get what I wanted, and Kamara's still there. Hey, send an offer. The worst somebody can say is no, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So moving into our last tier here, our wide receivers and our I should say the last two tiers, wide receiver and tight end. We got a bunch of young guys here, all 22 or 23, I should say, and younger. Demario Davis, Michael Wilson, Marvin Mims, Jameson Williams, Dontayvian Wicks, Cedric Tillman, and then at the tight end we have Michael Mayer, Musgrave, and Kraft. Looking at these names, I had Demario Davis in a lot of leagues, or Demario Douglas in a lot of leagues. I think he comes back. Obviously, he has 3 years left on his contract. I think he comes back and does well for a second year. He did well as a rookie, kind of, popped, as his nickname's Pop, kind of popped off there. I want to say after week 7, I think every game past that was 5 or more targets. Not that he had a lot of competition there, but hey, that might be the case this year. Even if they draft somebody in New England, they drafted Boot, they drafted Aaron Dobson. It seems like every wide receiver they draft there it goes to Pitts. So Demario Douglas I like a lot in this group, and Marvin Mims too. I was really high on him this year. I'm in a league right now where I'm trying to make trades for him. The guy's still staying the course. Hey, I like him too, rightfully so. I think you're right. But Marvin Mims definitely is somebody who you could send a trade for and buy on the low if somebody's rubbed the wrong way. Steve, how about these other wide receivers, man? What do you think? Michael Wilson, Jameson Williams, Dontayvian Wicks.
I love Michael Wilson for Arizona. He's, obviously you've got Rondale Moore, you've got, Greg Dortch, Hollywood Brown's probably gone, right? He's probably going to be leaving. So where does that do with this receiving core? I do expect Arizona to go wide receiver in the draft. So I think they're the 4th pick, which puts them in a nice position to get like Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. So that could play a factor in how Wilson's going to go into this season. But a full healthy Kyler Murray only adds value. Michael Wilson showed some signs, and he could easily all of a sudden become the wide receiver too. Put Rondell at the slot or Greg Dortch at the slot. Put Marvin Harrison Jr. or Neighbors at the 1, and Wilson all of a sudden becomes a wide receiver 2 at, that you could probably draft super late in your startup. He's not going to be those receivers that you think about when you're drafting young talent, an Olave, Garrett Wilson, right? I think people will draft Jameson Williams over, Michael Wilson before he's there because of the potential of what Jameson has shown. But Jameson has also been very inconsistent, right? I would like to take a Michael Wilson before I take him for sure.
Right. And I think even if they do get a Neighbors or Harrison Jr. or something like that, I'm not scared because that might be somebody to draw attention off Wilson, right?
For sure. And there's no reason, like I actually encourage them to get a player like that because it doesn't put everything on Wilson. He'll still, if he does end up being the wide receiver 2 in this role, we'll see how this offense plays out. But he all of a sudden becomes a guy who's getting, probably 5 to 6 targets a game. He'll be a nice wide receiver 3 or flex player this upcoming season if that plays out the way it should.
Absolutely, man. Definitely value to be had there. Don't forget about him on draft day. A couple other guys on this list. We said Dontayvian Wicks. We like him a little bit more than Bo Melton. Obviously, the community does too. Owned at 78% of sleeper apps. Yep. Maybe an injury too, or if Watson doesn't perform beginning of next year, Wicks is knocking on that door. So definitely a guy who 3 years left should definitely pique your interest in a startup. Also, Cedric Tillman from the Browns. I think that, this is a point where besides Amari Cooper there being the number 1, somebody's got to step up to be the number 2. We saw David Bell, kind of an honorable mention to this list, but we saw him over his first 2 years. Hasn't really showed, that knack to be the number 2 receiver there. Not saying Tillman did either. He was kind of no better than Bell this year, but he was a rookie, good prospect out of Tennessee. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm saying don't forget about this guy in your startup, right? Back end of the bench, last couple picks. If he's still there, do you see better days ahead potentially?
Yeah, he's wide receiver 3. He's behind Elijah Moore and Amari Cooper. Elijah Moore did have some concussion issues past season. He had that really nasty hit, unfortunately. Elijah Moore, I do have high hopes. Man, I loved him from the Jets to the Browns, but this is a passing league, and all it takes is one of these receivers to go down, and all of a sudden Cedric Tillman's getting, instead of maybe 3 targets a game, to 6 to 7 targets a game instantly because of where he's at in his roster. I don't expect the Browns to go after another receiver. I think they do like this core that they have. They like, Amari. They like, obviously, Elijah. They like Cedric Tillman. They like David Bell. Like, they like what they've got. You got a Njoku on the outside as well. So Tillman is actually our lowest owned in this category, 65% owned. So there's quite a few of you could probably stash him on your team. But if you're talking draft, you're doing your startup, you're like, man, I'm like, sometimes value makes sense. Like, grab Cedric Tillman. There's no reason to reach for him because I think you can get him at a late, maybe your 18th round or your startup, and you're like, man, this guy might have some value for me. And sits right on your roster, and bam, he might become a wide receiver 2. All it takes.
Absolutely, brother. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Tillman, if you're doing a startup, draft him back end of the bench, real late rounds. Don't forget about him. Could easily make the jump next year. And then we have three tight ends on this list, 23 or younger. Both of them are 23 from Green Bay, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. But we also have 22-year-old Michael Mayer. These guys all have 3 years left on their contract. I personally like Mayer a lot. I thought he was kind of like baby Gronk, coming in. And maybe that's a good thing. If you're in a startup right now, it's a perfect recipe because Michael Mayer kind of disappointed. I think he was a coach inactive the last game or two. He's somebody who probably you're not going to be able to make a trade and get this player on the low. I don't think people have really given up on him yet, especially with all the uncertainty quarterback there for Las Vegas this year. But Michael Mayer, for me, I have a big vote of confidence in him. I'm itching to start another startup so I can draft Michael Mayer and make this round 2, run it back with him. Do you like him too, Steve?
I like him. I'd give Musgrave a little bit more. I thought Musgrave was just a little bit better, obviously polished tight end coming into this, but Michael Mayer was obviously a great college tight end. Sometimes it takes a while for some of these college tight ends to come in. That was the expectation for a lot of these guys. You had Laporta, you had Kincaid, a lot of those tight ends. No one had expected those guys to just blow up the way they did, right? Because again, this was a really good rookie class this past season. So Musgrave, Mayer, these guys are going to be hard to trade for, but these are great tight ends you can stash or draft later if possible, because they are the ones who kind of are left out. Like Sam Laporta is going to be the number 1 tight end taken off the board now. Like he is the tight end 1 when it comes to Dynasty. Then you've got obviously Kincaid. A lot of people love what he was able to do. So you're going to see some tight ends go up there. And so these guys are going to be obviously later rounds. You're probably looking in the late, I would say 9th or 10th round, possibly for some of these guys, for a tight end who I think could still have value. Mayer obviously has to adjust to this offense. We'll see how this plays out. You also can't blame the guy, the quarterback situation, going from Jimmy G to Aiden O'Connell, then changing head coaches in the middle of the season. Now they're going into the season with Antonio Pierce as their head coach, with Aiden O'Connell as their quarterback. Only helps add. And you might be able to get him as a buy low if you get somebody who felt like they were burned, in their rookie draft. But realistically, these are great guys you should be drafting that you could probably get at a good value.
Interesting note too. It's like we said, this last year, rookie tight ends really hit. That really hasn't happened before, so it's kind of the changing of the guard. And this might be the perfect time for a guy like Michael Mayer.
It takes a while for tight ends to really adjust.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are kicking him saying, hey, man, where were you your rookie year? When is, before this year, when has rookie tight ends ever been a thing? So if somebody has that mindset, if he's fallen in startup drafts, pick him, because he's somebody who's definitely at 22 years old, has a lot of better days ahead. So I like these guys a lot. And finally, Tucker Kraft, man. I'm going to say don't forget about him. Don't leave him undrafted. Do you feel that same vibe with me?
Yeah, I mean, the only downside with Tucker Kraft is that he's got Musgrave in front of him. I mean, they do use some 2 tight end sets. He did show some signs when Musgrave got hurt. Kraft was phenomenal. So he's a very talented tight end. He's a little bit easier to grab if you look at waivers. You just want to kind of look at your league and kind of see what's available. But he's definitely gonna be a cheaper option. But it just the only concern is he's competing with Musgrave, and Musgrave is the better tight end overall. But Kraft definitely showed signs, and they're gonna have to use him. The Green Bay's got to use him, right? Like they're gonna have to make some adjustments on their offense to get both these guys on the field for sure.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it's going to be a good time, good year ahead. We're going to see what happens with these guys. They're probably, like we said, they're owned right now. But if you're in a startup, go ahead and take these guys later if you can, especially big days. Some young talent on this list, guys. We're looking forward to see what the next year brings. Right now, I want to give a shout out to the website Trophy Smack. If you are in a league, you're looking for a trophy. If you maybe won your league, you're looking for a way to spend your money. Maybe fantasy baseball is coming up. Go to trophysmack.com. Check out their selection of trophies, of rings, of belts. When you use the promo code IDP, guys, you get a free ring with a purchase of a trophy or a belt. Once again, use the promo code IDP, guys, with a purchase of a trophy or a belt, and you get a free ring with that purchase. Steve, it was a pleasure to break these guys down, man. Hopefully we gave the viewers and listeners a lot of promise, to take to their startups if they're in dynasty leagues already. Hopefully we gave some good sleepers. We scoured the waiver wire. We looked at those guys who were under-owned, underappreciated. I think we did a good job of giving the people really deep darts from shallow leagues to those really deeper throws. So thank you for breaking that down for me tonight. Before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, thank you for having me. Now I'm going to start looking at my sleepers, just make sure I got some of these guys that we talked about. It's always easy to kind of forget, this is off season, but Dynasty never ends. Always you got to get ahead of your competition. You got Combine next week. We got some great content coming up. So make sure you guys are obviously following us. Got Johnny Freaking F1, Average Joe's _FF on X. And of course, follow us on IDP. Check out our articles, YouTube. Obviously, if you're listening, check us out on Spotify and other places. And just make sure you guys are keeping us up and make sure we are here to help you guys out for this off season and of course upcoming season.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. And one more thing, man, send those trades. I know it's off season. You're tired. Send those trades. The worst thing somebody can say is no, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you to all our viewers and listeners. We will see you next time. Good luck on your startups and make those moves.
Thank you for watching this IDP Guys video. If you like this content and you want more fantasy football content, click here. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos to help you master your IDP league, click here to subscribe.